Welcome to UMDF's Ask the Mito Doc monthly webcast. Tonight, we will hear from Dr. Amel Kara from Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston, Dr. Philip Yeske, UMDF's Science and Alliance Officer, as well as Katarina Gray, UMDF's Science Project Coordinator. Our Ask the Mito Doc webcasts are made possible through the generosity of sponsors. So we ask that you join us in thanking Edith Trees Charitable Trust and Zogenix for their ongoing support. Every month, UMDF provides an important resource, virtual support meetings. We invite you to scan here or visit the UMDF calendar for upcoming meetings. Join us from the comfort of your own home for virtual support. Also, make sure you check out MitoU. This is a great resource for patient families and our scientific and medical community. It provides you with helpful information on diagnosis, treatments, and will be continually updated with informational videos for your viewing, including the archives of these Ask the Mito Doc webcasts. The highly anticipated MitoShare is now open, and we will hear more about that new program tonight. We have weekly office hours as well, should you want to learn more from our patient registry team, or visit umdf.org/MitoShare. In addition to MitoShare, UMDF is pleased to continue the advancement of research while supporting our patient community. If you haven't seen our new clinical trials page, make sure you check it out and try the Mito Clinical Trials Finder. Explore and find the right trial for you at www.umdf.org/clinical-trials. UMDF also recently launched a pilot genetic testing program. We are at 90%, but there is still time to submit. Learn more about this new program at www.umdf.org/testing. We are excited about Mitochondrial Medicine 2022, live in Phoenix, Arizona. Registration is now open. Please visit umdf.org/symposium to check out the program and register today. For those uncomfortable with traveling this summer, please remember that most sessions are recorded and we will provide an opportunity for you to participate in the Ask the Mito Doc panels virtually. Registration for those opportunities will open soon. Spring is not too far away to start thinking about participating in a walk near you. Walk your way this spring, safely. Find a walk location near you and walk your way at energyforlifewalk.org. We know you're seeking answers, and UMDF is always here to educate in difficult times and provide helpful resources and offer caring support. We can connect you with our patient concierge, or you can contact our support line at 888-900-6486, and our patient concierge representative will connect you with a local Mito family or a UMDF support ambassador from our national network of volunteers. Before we hear from our panel, we have some housekeeping items for you. We have muted the lines, so if during this webcast you have a question, please use the Q&A button to type in your question so that we can get answers for you. We ask that you keep your questions short for this webcast. We may not be able to answer questions that are too personal or detailed for this forum. Also, please note the information about the closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. Looking ahead, next month we will hear from Dr. Lusing and Bart Sumyun from Seattle Children's Hospital, Seattle, Washington, about gastrointestinal issues in patients with mitochondrial disease. Watch your email and social media for ways to register and to submit your questions. Now it's time to get started with Dr. Philip Yeske and Dr. Amel Kara.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you tonight on this March 2022 version of UMDF's Ask the Mito Doc. Our topic is the power of the patient voice, patient registries, and more. We have a lot of information we want to share with you tonight. And as always, these are really meant to be interactive. So please ask questions, put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we'll get to them as many as possible. Some may not be appropriate, some we may not be able to get to, but we'll do the best we can to answer as many as possible. So I'm joined, as the slide says, by Dr. Mel Cara. Hi, Mel, nice to see you.
Hi, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon.
Yeah, and Amel will be joining us a little bit later to talk about the clinician perspective on some of this topic. But a special guest as well, my colleague, Katerina Gray. I almost called you Dr. Katerina Gray. Congratulations on your
Hi,
recent
everyone.
degree. And of course, Katerina is the science project coordinator for UMDF. Her and I work closely together on all of the research mission projects. Tonight, though, she's here in a very special role, and that's the registry coordinator for Mito Share. So Katerina will be coming back on a little bit later to talk about some of the details, give everybody a sense for Mito Share, the new patient registry. So, all right, Mel and Katerina, I'll let you guys leave. I'm going to get started on the first part of this presentation. Next slide, please. So, we're here to talk about patient voice, and I thought it might be good just to kind of frame the discussion with, what is patient voice? Why is it important? And really, patient voice is all about increasing the role of patients and families in managing the disease. Really being more present in the care of the disease, but also having input and being engaged in what therapeutic development means. And we're really going to focus on therapeutic development tonight. That is a core part of the UMDF mission, developing treatments and cures for mitochondrial disease patients. So I think the question that we're really framing is, how could that therapeutic development process be more inclusive of what's important to patients and families? For many years, it wasn't the case at all. Really, clinicians and the drug industry, together with the FDA, sort of made a determination of what was best for the patients and developed therapeutics in that direction. And I think the outcome was many therapeutics being developed that ultimately weren't optimal for the patients or from the patient's perspective, addressing what's most important to them. So understanding the burden of the disease to patients and caregivers, which symptoms are of greatest concern, and a very important part too is a willingness of patients to accept some amount of risk for a given amount of benefit. So that's really kind of a critical component of where the patient voice is important, is diving deep on these aspects, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But it's also about amplifying the patient voice with a regulatory agency. So you can imagine, the FDA sees hundreds of new drug applications in any given year. There are over 7,000 rare diseases and growing daily. It's really hard for the FDA to become an expert in any one disease. So it's incumbent upon the patient community and patient advocacy groups to educate the FDA. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms we use to do that and the role that you can play. Next slide, please. So 3 sections that we wanted to cover tonight before we get to the Q&A. I wanted to talk about regulatory agency interactions, some of what I foreshadowed there in that prior slide. Then we'll talk about patient registry activities, and that's where we'll get into Mito Share. And then finally, the clinician perspective on patient voice. So kind of quickly looking at the timeline for regulatory agency interactions. I joined on staff in 2013. At that point in time, there was 1 clinical trial in mitochondrial disease. There had really been very little interaction between the FDA and the patient community or patient advocacy groups. We knew it was urgent that we needed to begin a dialogue. And the best process for that is something they call a critical path innovation meeting. I don't know how that name applies to what we accomplished, but it's really about initiating that dialogue with the FDA, beginning to help them understand the challenges around mitochondrial disease. But again, it's a starting point for the dialogue. I think it was a 1-hour meeting. Lots of people attended. The message we are sending is, in the mitochondrial disease community, we really want you to keep the patient perspective central, right? From a regulatory point of view, be thinking about that from the very beginning. I think that message was well delivered in 2015. And from there, we began planning sort of next steps with the FDA. On the next slide, please. In 2019, we had a major milestone. In coordination with other patient advocacy groups, we hosted Energy in Action, which was an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. So that was the patient advocacy groups taking on the responsibility of approaching the FDA, saying, here's what we'd like to present to you. There are many different types of mitochondrial disease patients, but two of the most common populations are children with neurological manifestations of mitochondrial disease, and adults with myopathies or muscle-based symptoms. So those were the two groups that we formed and created panels and testimonies around, did some surveying. Many FDA officials attended this. I think it was over 20 that came to the meeting in person, but importantly, all of this is memorialized. So the link you see on your screen at umdf.org/voice of the patient contains a record of really everything that took place. You could watch the entire 8-hour meeting there. There's a transcript of it. And really the best summary is the Voice of the Patient report that we created after the meeting. And there's also a link to that as well. So we have a lot of information there about the burden of the disease, idealized treatments, risk benefit. We collected hundreds of quotes from the patient community. This is a resource that the FDA and industry will turn to as they continue to develop therapeutics for mitochondrial disease to make sure that the science is aligned with what's best for, or what's important to the patient community. So from there, later that same year, there was a follow-up workshop that actually Dr. Kara helped to organize at the FDA. And the focus there was on clinical trial readiness. And that's a little different. There's definitely a patient component to that. So we have to be ready as a patient community. And we're going to talk about patient registries and how important that is in terms of clinical trial readiness. But importantly, we also need to think about what are the best outcome measures? How do we measure the disease over time? How do we know if interventions are making a difference in it? The structure of the trials, the types of patient populations that are recruited into the trials. So that was a discussion that really focused on what I like to call the blocking and the tackling of running clinical trials. So that was a really important discussion as well. And then in 2022, just I guess less than 2 months ago now, we conducted a FDA listening session focused on TK2 deficiency. So I think some of you or all of you may know that there's an intervention, a drug in development for TK2D patients. The idea here was to dive deeper on this specific form of mitochondrial disease, very similar format to the externally led patient-focused drug development meeting, in that we helped recruit patients and caregivers who could talk about the burden of the disease, living with the disease, what idealized treatments look like, and again, what kind of risk these patients are willing to accept for a given amount of a benefit. This was extremely well attended by the FDA. There were over 50 FDA personnel on that call. And it really gave us the chance to kind of fill in some of the gaps that weren't addressed in that 2019 meeting with the FDA. We see additional opportunities for other topics of listening sessions in the future. It's a little bit of a negotiation with the FDA in terms of priority and what they're interested in hearing about. But the overarching message here is it's an ongoing discussion, and it's one that's going to continue for many, many years to ensure that the FDA understands mitochondrial disease, and importantly, that we understand from a regulatory point of view the expectations of the FDA in bringing forward new interventions. But really, one of the key findings across all of these programs over 5, 6, 7 years was that patient registries are a really important tool for identifying, characterizing, and engaging the patient community. So I'd like to kind of pivot at this point to now talking about patient registries and some of our activities on this front. Next slide. Next slide, please. So a lot of information on here. Let me try to guide you. Let's start on the far right. All right, so UMDF has actually been in the registry business really as far back as there was a UMDF, right? So, you know, Chuck Mohan was very active in the early days of beginning to bring patients together, share information. They didn't call it a registry effort then, but that's really what was going on. You know, when there was very little coordination in the mitochondrial disease space, Chuck and UMDF really took the lead in beginning to identify patients, share information, and try to advance the science to the point of clinical trials. And you know, Chuck is certainly to be commended for his efforts over so many years. Again, in the mid 2000s, you know, somewhere around 2010, 2014, you know, we saw that technology was catching up, science was catching up. It was really important to get even more involved in patient registries. And when I joined the staff in 2013, it was #1 priority was for UMDF to really do a more focused effort on patient registries. And that led to the creation of the Mitochondrial Disease Community Registry. We ran that registry for 5+ years. And the result of that was actually published, an article that I authored that really was about looking at the data we collected over those 5 years. There were really a lot of important findings there. And one of the most important ones was the need to optimize clinical care. How can we improve that? That can be through an even better registry that's collecting information in a different way, in a more effective way. That can be by improving communication between clinician and patient. All of it you could summarize kind of under optimizing patient care. So we knew that that registry was going to be limited in terms of what we could do, and that our goal was really to move in this direction of optimizing patient care. And I've included this quote here about co-production of care, which I think is really wonderful, right? That it's a recognition that healthcare requires an interaction between patients and care providers, and the interdependency between these actors for achieving a positive outcome. So it's not one or the other. It's not the doctor's responsibility, and it's certainly not the patient's responsibility. It's an interdependency of both to achieve that. But if we think about this from a patient registry point of view, how can we support that? You know, we wanted to create something that had both a research component and a support component to it. From a support side, it was really important to us, like what could we include in the registry that would help to make patient lives easier? So this might be being able to track symptoms over time, or medications over time, or activities. You know, do that in a convenient way that could be shared with their healthcare providers. It could include the ability to share that information and with the healthcare providers, or store data such as genetic testing reports or MRIs and these sorts of things. That we view as equal parts support and research. But from a patient-centered research point of view, we needed to build something that was centered on the patients, but was going to be valuable to researchers, to industry, clinicians, because these data are precious, all right? Every data point is really important, and we have to maximize the value of it. So these were the thoughts behind us as we were considering what we wanted the next version of the UMDF patient registry to be. And so I'm really pleased to share with you that just 2 weeks ago, and the next slide, please, we launched MitoShare, UMDF's new patient registry. And we thought a lot about that name, because I really think sharing is central to what makes our disease community, or positions our disease community for success in developing those therapeutics. We all have to do our part in terms of sharing our data, making it available so that learnings can come from that. So that's really what MitoShare is about. It's a very broad initiative to support the patient community, but also to facilitate the development of meaningful treatments to the patient community. So how will we do this? So we have to be able to find the patients and characterize the patients. We have to understand your disease from a genetics point of view, because that's what primary mitochondrial disease is. It's based on genetic abnormalities. But then we also have to phenotypically or describe the symptoms, right, of the patient. So there's balance inside of that. And we're really looking to complement clinician-derived data that may be gathered when you're at a hospital or at your doctor and providing information with patient-derived data. So it's really this combination that makes it that much stronger. Fundamentally, MitoShare has been set up to be a research database. And there are some consequences of that that we'll talk about as we move through the process. First and foremost, IRB is an institutional review board. This means that from an ethics point of view, all the studies we run have been reviewed to say that they're appropriate and safe for patients with mitochondrial disease. And the platform itself has IRB oversight. So we've actually set up the registry as a IRB approved study, meaning we have to describe our goals in running the registry, and we have to describe how we're going to explain the study to any participant who's interested and eventually provide something called informed consent. We'll talk more about that. Make no doubt about it, though, just to be clear, one of the major goals of MitoShare is to facilitate clinical trial recruitment. And one of the best ways we can do that is to encourage as many patients possible to join the registry. Again, this registry is for patients at all stages of their diagnostic journey. You could perhaps just heard of mitochondrial disease, even be discussing it with your doctor. You're welcome inside MitoShare. You maybe have had a longstanding relationship with a healthcare provider, and mitochondrial disease is suspected, but still has not yet been clinically diagnosed or genetically diagnosed. You're welcome inside MitoShare. And of course, anyone who already has a genetically confirmed mitochondrial disease is also welcome in the registry. And that's where we want to make sure we really understand these patients, because for clinical trials, at least at this point in time, having a genetic diagnosis is a critical eligibility criterion for being able to participate in clinical trials. So we're going to think a lot about what we can do to help everyone across that entire spectrum to engage, but help you move along this journey towards having a diagnosis. There's many other benefits besides being able to participate in clinical trials. It's better healthcare that emerges from having a diagnosis. So that's really a focus of the registry. And to collect the data and not use the data would be a total waste of time. So our goal is to maximize the utility of the data once it's collected in an appropriate way. And I made it bold and underlined it to assure you that our top priority is reviewing any requests for use of data inside MitoShare to make sure that it's appropriate, that it's in the best interests of the mitochondrial disease patient community, and we're going to learn something from it. And whoever is using it is going to return back to the community a report on how those data have been of use to them. That's a really important component as well. So with that as backdrop, this is the big introduction. Our landing page for MitoShare is now live. You'll find it at umdf.org/registry. Here's where you can read about MitoShare. There are many resources there. And importantly, this is how you can begin the process of considering participation. And I say considering because it's a very personal decision. I encourage everyone and all your peers and all your friends to consider the possibility of joining the registry. We need numbers. And the only way we can do that is to spread the word and make the case for why it's important. And hopefully you have a good experience with it. But we also understand it's a very personal decision and it's not necessarily for everyone. Perhaps you'll reconsider it at a later time. But I'm going to pause there and allow Katerina to take it from here, who's going to show you some of the highlights of MitoShare. So you have a sense, even if you haven't joined yet, you at least have a sense for what you can expect. So, Kat?
Thank you, Phil. As Phil mentioned, you can join the registry at umdf.org/registry by clicking new account. For those of you that have already registered and just need a link back in, there's also a button there for you as well. I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of the onboarding. It should take you approximately less than 10 minutes to actually create an account inside of MitoShare. To create the account, when you click new account, this is the screen that you will see. It will say request access. Some details, some data fields that are required to just create the account is your name, your email, a mobile phone, and your date of birth. If you're uncomfortable providing your cell phone number, you can also use a landline or just a general 555-55555 number. Here's the components that we need everybody to fill out appropriately, whether or not you are of legal age, which is 18 or older, or at least age of majority in the state or country you live in. And since we are accepting international patients and participants, there's that button saying you are located within the US or outside of the US. And then at the bottom, you will see that there's 3 different types of accounts that you can create. 1 is a patient participant, 2 is a caregiver, and 3 is a person who has lost a loved one to a rare disease. So if you are a parent or a caregiver of someone with Mito, you would choose caregiver participant. If you are a caregiver and have Mito yourself and are affected, you would choose patient and caregiver. If you're someone who has lost a loved one to mitochondrial disease, you would select person who has lost a loved one to rare disease, and it would automatically select the caregiver participant and that last one. If you accidentally get to this page and you didn't mean to and you just meant to log in, there is a bottom right, there's a go to login that just takes you directly to the login screen. So the onboarding process, there's quite a few steps, and we have, it's a email process that makes you verify your email address. It provides you a code to make sure that it is the right person creating the account. And then it has you create a password. And the final screen that you will see before you're actually in MitoShare will be this, our UMDF logo. It'll ask you to use your email address that you entered when you requested access, and then your newly created password. As Phil mentioned, to be on the platform, all participants will have to sign terms of use in regards to our software provider, which is Matrix. You have to agree to the terms of use, otherwise you can't be on the platform. And then in regards to being part of the registry, since this is a study, it does require a informed consent. As you see here, Phil has worked diligently over the last few months outlining exactly what MitoShare is, the purpose of it, and how we're going to collect data and share data and use it. As Phil says, if you're uncomfortable to agree to the informed consent right there on the spot, there's a button right there that says blank consent download. You can absolutely download it and read it at your pace. If you have any questions, you see that our telephone number and our email address, registry@umdf.org, you can also contact us through that with any questions in regards to the informed consent. Once you get through the informed consent, it'll ask you to agree. There's 8 line items. If you click yes, you will be able to electronically consent to the informed consent. If you, however, click no, it indicates that you will not be able to participate in MitoShare activity at this point. So you'll be sitting in this waiting room, and every time you go to sign on into MitoShare, it'll lead you back to the informed consent. Again, we do need you to agree to all 8 line items to participate in MitoShare activity. Once you have agreed to the informed consent, you can absolutely email it, the signed consent to yourself and print it for your records. That was part of our IRB agreement. That's right here at the very bottom. And then you must click complete to go to the general information aspect of Matrix. So this section is called the general information, and there's two parts to it. It's called demographics and other information. These are pretty standard data fields required in creating accounts. As you can see, everything with an asterisk must be completed. And here's the other information chunk of it. Again, once you've completed everything, you have to click save at the bottom when you're done, and it will lead you to your patient dashboard. This is what a patient dashboard looks like. I will also show you what a caregiver dashboard looks like in just a few. But the patient dashboard looks like this. So it has the navigation bar to the left here. And in the upper left-hand corner, if you're inside of a patient account, it'll state their name, and underneath it'll say patient. If you're inside a caregiver account, it'll state the name and state that it's a caregiver. So that we call that the account identifier. The left-hand side is the navigation bar. And these are all the applications and tools inside of Matrix and MitoShare that you're able to use. In the upper right-hand corner, of course, under the avatar, the little person, there's the logout button, the settings. Those are the two major things that everybody needs to be aware of. So this is what a caregiver account looks like. Again, much less detail in the navigation in regards to the navigation apps than the patient dashboard has. But here, once you sign up for a caregiver account, this is how you add patients. You click this green button and you're able to add as many patients as you want to your caregiver account. Once you have added patients, it will look like this. It'll list your patients in the top bar, and in the bottom, it'll have, it says My Dashboard, which is in regards to the caregiver's dashboard. In the completed section of that, you will have the informed consent saved that you signed at the beginning of signing up for MitoShare. To view patient dashboards, you have to go to that little booklet in the right-hand corner under each patient. It leads you right to their page, and you can again access your informed consent under the completed section of your own dashboard. In case we are reconsenting or the informed consent has changed for some reason and we need to reconsent everybody, you will be able to view, update, and again, email your informed consent to yourselves through this 3 ellipses there, as Matrix calls it. And all informed consent updated versions will be tracked. So from the first one that you sign to if we have a new version, you will be able to access all of them in this section. Okay, our #1 application that I'm pointing every new registry participant to is the surveys and studies section of MitoShare. Currently, we have 2 surveys. It's called the Diagnostic Intake Survey and the Detailed Demographic Survey. And this will be the section where you will be able to access all new studies and surveys that we will be running through MitoShare. You will be notified about these studies and surveys as well through messages that I will be sending out before they go live, just to let everybody know that this is what's coming down the pipe. As you see, there's 2 tabs. One is called New and in Progress, and the other one is called Completed. Surveys and studies that you have not accessed yet or you've started to access will be in the New/in Progress tab, and the ones that you've completed will be in the Completed tab. As you can see here, in the test environment, I've signed 2 consent forms, and I wanted to just show that you're able to track all completed surveys. Okay, so the Diagnostic Intake Survey is presented to all patient accounts. Unfortunately, right now, we are not able to present caregivers with surveys. That is coming, but it's just not a current capability. And what this captures is important information to understand each patient's relationship with mitochondrial disease. As Phil says, one of the big things about MitoShare is to have people ready for clinical trials in their appropriate buckets, diagnosed, on the diagnostic journey, suspected of mitochondrial disease. So this is our way to kind of navigate who belongs where and have registry participants available when the clinical trials do come about to participate in. Right now, the diagnostic intake survey is down. We have to edit a couple of questions in there. So if you're signing up, you will not be able to take it currently, but I will let everybody know once the new version is up and ready to go. And then the second survey is the detailed demographic survey. Again, just like the diagnostic intake survey, it is presented to all patient accounts currently. And it's just extra demographic data that we are gathering to be able to create GUIDs, which is our global unique identifiers for each of our MitoShare participants. That way we can try and share data across different type of registries, like NAMDAC, for example. They're using a GUID system. And so we're trying to implement that with MitoShare as well. And that is basically the top, I would say, app that I would like everybody to access once they are inside of MitoShare and they've agreed and gone through the onboarding process and agreed to the ICF. I'm happy to always, like I said, discuss any issues or concerns you have in regards to the informed consent. Both Phil and I are happy to answer any questions. Feel free to email us at registry@umdf.org or contact us under those numbers that we've provided in the actual consent form.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kat. Really good overview. For those of you that haven't signed up yet, it at least gives you a sense. There were a couple aspects in there. Kat, I think mentioning about the surveys and studies sort of being the #1 app or application, right, that we want people to go to. I want everyone to understand that these are short and highly targeted surveys. They should really take you less than 5 minutes. That was one of the learnings from MDCR, from Mitochondrial Disease Community Registry, is rather than asking a lot of questions on one survey, better to present them in short, more targeted surveys.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, Phil, but as you can,
aspect.
as you can see here on screen, the intake survey is 5 questions long, and the detailed demographic survey is only 11. So like Phil says, these should be very quick. Right.
And the other important aspect is work at your own pace. You do not have to do everything in one sitting. Yes, the account creation is a workflow that you do need to move through. If the informed consent, you want to review it further or discuss it with either myself or Kat or any aspect of it, take as long as necessary. But once you're on platform, you can answer one survey, you can do 2 questions and stop. The system will remember where you left off. So I think that's a really important one for many members of our community, where it may be hard, right, from an energy management point of view to have the energy to move all the way through it. So work at your own pace, explore the tools in that navigation bar at your leisure. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they're also about providing support to you. So play with it some and find out what works best for you. Do you want to track your medications? Do you want to keep track of some key symptoms? If seizures are part of your disease, do you want to use the system to be able to say, yes, I'm having seizures, this frequently, to be able to then share that with your clinician. I think each individual's usage of MitoShare will be highly individualized. So take your time, and we're here for any questions that you might have. As Kat mentioned, registry@umdf.org is the best way to get hold of us.
And could I just interject one more time, Phil? We do have MitoShare office hours, Wednesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time, where I will take each week to go through one of these applications and take general questions from the community, feedback as well. And we will also be creating how-to videos that will be part of the office hours. They will be recorded as well. So if you have any questions, email us or come to the office hours.
Yeah, so why don't we turn it over to Dr. Kara, who I think has just one slide and wants to kind of share the clinician perspective, and then we can regroup for a Q&A session. Again, submit your questions under Q&A, and we'll do the best we can to get to as many as possible.
Thank you, Phil and
Dr.
Kat.
Kara?
I'm very honored to be here today to give you my perspective on what this registry means. I know in the rare disease community, we always hear about these registries left and right, and everyone is interested in creating new registries. And you might think as a patient or a caregiver, a family member, what's the use of being involved in so many registries? Well, I'm going to give you my perspective on that. Next. So first of all, I think registry like these, like Mito Share, is very important to give more power to the patient and the caregiver and the family member who takes care of patients, because it allows you to, for this Mito Share registry specifically, to share the clinical information that you would like to share. And it also allows you here specifically to select and be associated with the mitochondrial disease expert that follows you. And that allows you to take your clinical care specifically at hand and advocate for yourselves and allow access to your healthcare information to the physicians that cares for you. As a physician, I can tell you, despite the fact that we all use electronic medical record and they are supposed to talk to each other and we are supposed to have access to every patient record in any electronic healthcare system at a click of a button, we are still struggling a lot to find information and clinical data on patients when we see them in clinic. So if the patient takes charge of their own health records and share those with us through a registry like this one, it'll save everyone a lot of time and will give us direct access to the information that we need so that your appointment goes much smoother and we are able to give you all the information that you need to have during the clinical visit. Next slide. The other important point of having registries for rare diseases and specifically for mitochondrial disease is that when patients enter their data, especially if they do that regularly, is in what we call longitudinal perspective, meaning that every few months or every year you enter more data to allow us to better understand how your disease is progressing, what's happening to you and to your family. It helps us clinicians have a better sense of what we call the natural history of the disease, meaning that we will have access to information that will tell us, look, these patients who have this specific mutation or this specific type of disease, whether it starts during childhood or later in life, they might develop this kind of complication. So we need to be more mindful of these complications and follow them more thoroughly and follow them more specifically. And it helps. All these information that we gather and that we look at helps us get those answers to family members that might be newly diagnosed and are very anxious to have information about what to expect in the future, what should we be mindful of. So things like these registries are very important to get us those answers so that we can give them to you and to your families. Next. The third point that I want to make is that because mitochondrial diseases are so complex and there are so many of them, we are still learning, and you are our teachers. We learn so much from the information that you give us, and this also allows us to answer specific questions that we might have, and this registry will allow us to come up with these questions that need answers and share those questionnaires with you so that we can learn more about these specific points that need clarification. And so having access to a pool of patients and caregivers and family members that can answer those questions, that can be in touch with us at a click of a button, is a really important step in moving that clinical research forward and in moving our understanding of what should we as clinicians do for you in clinic, what kind of medication would work best for you, what kind of intervention would work best for this type of mitochondrial disease versus this type of mitochondrial disease. So this is what the registry allows us to do, and the information that you enter allows us to do. Next. And as Phil has talked to you at the beginning, clinical trial readiness plays a really important part of all of this. We are now doing so many more clinical trials, and I myself, I'm engaged in developing and coming up with protocols and talking to the FDA about what a clinical trial for mitochondrial disease should look like. And I don't have mitochondrial disease. I don't live with the disease. So I need to hear your voices. I need to hear what the issues that you are facing on a day-to-day basis look like, so that I can synthesize all of that and help these companies and help drug developers and the FDA get a better understanding of what needs to be fixed, what is more meaningful for you to be fixed, so that we can come up with the most appropriate clinical trial design and clinical trial visits to the hospital, so that cure and that drug can become available to all of you. And so registries like these are very important for us to identify what is most meaningful to you, and for you to voice your concerns and give us insight into what's most important for you. So I think these registries are very important on all of these aspects. And as a clinician and someone who is very involved in clinical trial, I am very excited about this launching, and I'm looking forward to using up all the data that comes through from it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amel. And Kat, rejoin us as well. But we're starting to get some great questions coming in here. And Dr. Kara, maybe this first one's best for you as a geneticist. If a mother has genetically confirmed mitochondrial disease, does that mean their children are automatically considered genetically confirmed?
Well, I think it depends on several things, and we really have to look into the details of what the genetic condition looks like. There is a difference between autosomal dominant and nuclear defect mitochondrial disorder versus mitochondrial DNA disorders. And there are many other factors such as heteroplasmy and age of onset of the disease that come into play. So the short answer is no. It doesn't necessarily mean that the children are affected, but you have to talk to your doctor.
That's really the critical short answer is not automatically, right? So it's really a discussion that you need to have as a patient with your healthcare providers to understand the genetics associated with your form of the disease. There are some questions coming in sort of about the capabilities of MitoShare. And maybe I'm just going to kind of lump a couple of these together, right? So there's a question, are you able to track symptoms inside of MitoShare? And what about appointments? Are you able to track those sorts of things?
Yeah, let me just go back to the dashboard here, just so for visual. Symptoms and activities is a great place to track exactly what they were inquiring about. You can enter any symptom or activity and mark off the intensity of it and how frequently it's happening during the week. Tracking appointments is absolutely available under the health information section. Once you open that app, you would be able to track meds, supplements, labs, vaccines, appointments, and you can set them to notify you via email and or text message as well.
And maybe this is a good time to mention that as we continue to grow MitoShare, we're going to be recording more detailed resources that describe how to use each of these, and we have some user guides available. It's a great place to kind of find out, and many of those resources are available right on the landing page that we described earlier, umdf.org/registry.
Right.
So there's a question about who will see our info. This is a really important one, right? And so I'm actually going to take it. I'm going to put my hand up here, and if either Kat or Mel, you want to jump in, please do too. But this is a really important one in terms of privacy. The structure of MitoShare is that you share personally identifiable information. Those information are only available for UMDF registry administration to see, just to kind of help you with it. But for any use of the data for research purposes, data will only be shared in a de-identified way. And I can't emphasize that enough, right? That any data usage will be de-identified. No one will have from the outside, whether it be, say, a clinician, unless you've given them direct access to your account, but any researcher that's interested in using the data inside MitoShare will have to submit a summary of the research they want to conduct and give a reason for doing it. And we have an advisory committee that will approve that usage, again, to make sure that it's appropriate. And then we'll return, if it's deemed appropriate, we'll return the data to the researcher. They won't come in and be able to manipulate the data themselves on platform. So this is really important. Respecting your privacy and ensuring that you feel confident that it will be protected inside of MitoShare is really a top priority. Kat, there was a question about, for a disease, do I put down MELAS if I've not been diagnosed, but my mother has been? This is an important one, right? To kind of understand how to guide people in their own diagnosis versus someone else's.
Yes, so we do have a box that lets you fill out exactly what mitochondrial disease you personally have been diagnosed with. If you are suspected of having one, we do have that option. It says suspected mitochondrial disease. But if you have not been diagnosed with MELAS, then please do not select MELAS. That would be under your mother's account.
That's right. So this is really important, right? You're really answering on your own behalf, and we'll do everything we can to help you if you're unsure about how to answer these questions. But you have to answer to the best of your ability for your own situation, not as you're related to someone else that has mitochondrial disease. But please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help you with that in any way. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, there's a question about caregiver. The question was about caregiver access. When will we have it? We have caregiver access, but Kat, do you want to just kind of talk about the difference between caregiver and patient account once more in terms of capabilities?
Certainly.
You don't have to go all the way back if you don't want.
It's okay. The caregiver dashboard is right here. So as a caregiver, you'll have the ability to add patients and have full access to your patient's accounts. But unfortunately, you will not be able to. So if you're wanting to input data on behalf of the patient, like their medicine or supplements, then you will have to go into their account and do so. As a caregiver yourself, we don't have EHR connection or genetic testing upload. That would all have to be through the patient's portal itself. The caregiver's dashboard is just to basically be able to add data through the patient's accounts. And like I said earlier, hopefully soon we will have the ability to also have surveys and studies available specifically to caregivers. It's just not a capability we have right now.
Right, as a starting point.
Yep.
Amel, maybe this is a good one for you. How will my data help move research forward?
Yeah, so all the things that I said before, this registry might help with us better understanding the nature of the disease, how the disease progresses over time. It will help us better understand what to expect in terms of complication and how best to manage them and what best therapy could help them, and also will help us understand what is most meaningful to you and to your family in terms of intervention that might help either cure the disease or make the disease more tolerable and make the day-to-day symptoms more tolerable. There are many other ramification of registries like these, and I would echo what Phil and Kat has said about entering the data to the best of your knowledge, because I foresee in the future that we might reach out to you to ask you to participate in a research, and the criteria and the information that you put into this registry are going to be used to select you as maybe being a potential participants in these. So the more accurate you are, the better chances you will have to being contacted or being part of these studies.
Yeah, this is a really good point, and I think you made it earlier worth reinforcing. Things change over time with mitochondrial disease. And you may answer a survey in a certain way today, particularly around your diagnostic state, that 6 months from now has changed. So these are the kinds of surveys and questions that will be asked over time, and we will ask you to come back and update those. So Kat, there was a question asking if there will be reminders to update information. Maybe you could just speak briefly to how notifications work on the platform.
Certainly. So you will get notifications through the messaging center in the navigation bar. Again, if you set your notifications to emails and or texts, it will let you know that there's a message waiting for you. In regards to longitudinal surveys or studies, we will send a message out in advance, but it will also ping you once you sign in your account. There will be a little green dot next to surveys and studies indicating that there is a new survey or study for you to complete. So you will get a notification through messages and through the actual platform itself.
Yeah, so if you share a mobile number and are able to receive text messages, you'll know right away. That can also be used for notifications around tracking medications or medical appointments. So it's a really convenient way to kind of stay on top of your health care as you go forward. There's a question around the adding information about a child that has passed away. And Kat, we talked about the various types of accounts at the beginning, but maybe once more you could just review the range of participants in MitoShare.
Absolutely. So we have 3 accounts available. It's a patient account for an affected individual, a caregiver account, and a deceased account, a participant who has lost someone to a rare disease. If you have a patient that has passed due to mitochondrial disease, you would be selecting that last account, and that will automatically set up your caregiver account. The workflow will trigger you to create your caregiver account first, and then ask you to add the information on behalf of the patient that has passed away.
Yes. So, again, every data point is important. And yes, we need those who are living with the disease now to share. But for those of us, myself included, that lost a loved one to mitochondrial disease, to the extent that you can, to share that data for your lost loved one, really important to advancing the research. So the system is set up to handle that, and we ask you to consider contributing those data too. So Amel, I'm going to ask you to put your clinician hat on for a second here, because I think this is an important one in terms of understanding that dynamic between patient and clinician that's kind of come up in a couple different contexts. The attendee was asking that when a Mito patient's dealing with a complex acute medical issue, how should he or she respond to a physician who asks the patient to identify only one issue? It's difficult to answer. It's frustrating when time's limited. It's important to share all the key medical issues for a more holistic picture, and because medical issues can be interrelated. I'm sure this is a balance between time available, but the information that you need to have as a clinician to help your patient. Could you just comment on that perhaps for our audience?
Yeah, thank you for sharing this with us. I know it's very frustrating to have very limited time to deal with many questions and many complex issues. I think depending on the time availability, you might consider telling your doctor about the 1 or 2 top symptoms, and then there are other ways to sharing information, including emailing and HIPAA compliant gateway messages. But I think also it's important to use MitoShare in that context. If you are able to input information and medical summaries into MitoShare, you can share that information with your doctor, and you can send them this information before your visit. All of us spend a lot of time before the clinic visit reviewing records and making sure that we are very familiar with the issues. So that might be an option for you and your doctor to talk about, to send over this information and give your doctor access to this information. I think this is something that we all struggle with, but you're right. You also have to advocate for yourself and become a teacher. Sometimes when you are not faced with someone who knows mitochondrial disease well, you might have to educate them about this. And I would refer you to the Mito University, the Mito U that was introduced at the beginning of the talk. If your provider is willing to learn more about mitochondrial disease, you can refer them to this resource, and also to the Mitochondrial Medicine Society website, which is www.mitosoc.org.
Yeah, excellent resource, no doubt about it. Maybe one more in sort of the clinical realm here. And it's a question regarding how often is mitochondrial disease misdiagnosed. It sounds like this person was first treated for MS and then optic atrophy, and then they found a pathogenic variant that ended up being mitochondrial disease. This is the challenge, isn't it, of mitochondrial disease? It's not always an easy diagnosis.
Yeah, it happens. It depends on where you live and what kind of healthcare system you have access to. In bigger academic center, we are faced with more diverse and rare conditions. So physician might be more aware of mitochondrial diseases, but if you are in a community setting where they only see the most common diseases, they might not be as aware. And so we do have patients that have been misdiagnosed with many different conditions. And this is where a registry like this might help us gather more information about what are the most common misdiagnoses that patients face, and build educational material that might educate these physicians so that when they are faced with someone with those symptoms, that they should think about mitochondrial disease and know how to order testing, the proper diagnostic testing to inform their workup for those patients. So this is where it's very important for you to accurately describe what you go through from the beginning till the diagnostic and after the diagnostic is made, so we can learn about how better to serve you and the community.
Yeah, I think getting our patient community to an accurate diagnosis is really a top priority for UMDF. And I think in other forums, you've heard me talk about our first sponsored genetic testing program, which is really about trying to enable the patients to provide their symptoms, even if it's suspected of mitochondrial disease, don't yet have genetic diagnosis, share your symptoms, and perhaps be eligible to receive a no-cost genetic test. You can find out information about that on our website on umdf.org. I believe it's /testing, but perhaps one of my colleagues can put the link in the chat for everyone to find out about that program. This is really critical, right? We need, for the patient's benefit, to get to a diagnosis, but also to be able to facilitate clinical trials. We need as many patients as possible with a diagnosis. So working through that journey is something we're doing all we can to try to shorten that and get patients to a diagnosis. I see we're just after the top of the hour here. Kat, I think there was one more question that may have some confusion about that very first screen you shared about, even though it says request access, are you requesting access for yourself or for the patient? Well, whose information should be included on that very first screen?
Great question. So it will be your information. If you're signing up as a caregiver, please enter your information. And once you are on platform and you select add patient, as you can see this green little button on my screen, that's where you add the patient's information. So on the request access, it's all about the person who is signing up for the account.
Yeah, the best practice is, if you're a caregiver of an affected individual, create your caregiver account first, then add the patient. So your information, you consent to participating in research on the platform, then you add the patient, and each patient would then need to be individually consented as well. A really important clarification. Okay, well, again, great discussion. We're really excited about MitoShare. We ask you to consider participating in it. We already have over 100 patients on the platform and over 50 caregivers on the platform inside of 2 weeks. And I can't tell you how gratifying that is to continually see how this community is ready to do their part, to share. And that's really what Mito Share is about. So thank you for all of you that have already gone through the process. We'll continue to look for ways to keep you engaged there and provide information, interesting information to you around Mito Share. And we're always here to help. Dr. Kara, thank you for your participation tonight, bringing the the clinician perspective. And of course, Kat, you as well for the great work you're doing in supporting this. So I think we'll call it to a close for tonight and look forward to seeing you all again in a future Ask the Mito.
Thank you for having me. Good night.